guys, welcome back to Fundamentals of Design, a TUTS Plus premium course. I'm Sean Hodge, and we're continuing with the Design Elements section of this series. Today's lesson is Putting It Together, Visual Hierarchy. In this lesson, we'll cover some theory on visual hierarchy and dip our toe into the Gestalt principles of perception. This knowledge will build upon what we've learned so far in the Fundamentals of Design videos and require us to put the principles we've learned together. Many of the basics of graphic design we've covered are rooted in principles of perception. As designers, we're learning to break down this perception into smaller, understandable chunks. Now we need to recombine these ideas into one whole and use them to communicate visual information with clarity. We'll do this by working through an example of redesigning a business card. We'll end by giving you an assignment so you can practice your design skills further before getting started on the next lesson. At its core, graphic design is communicating visual information. Understanding that people will see our designs in terms of visual relationships is crucial to becoming an effective designer. Visual hierarchy is the order in which the human eye perceives what it sees. This is designed by controlling how the eye perceives visual relationships. How we arrange things suggests hierarchy. As graphic designers, think of visual hierarchy as leading the viewer through the visual information you design. For example, directing a viewer's gaze down a page in a book, across a business card, or through a website. You create order with visual relationships and lead a viewer's eye through design by using the principles we've been learning, such as contrast, size, alignment, the use of space and weight. You add emphasis, create balance or tension, all for the aim of controlling the perception of the design. These visual relationships you create are a designer's equivalent to punctuation and grammar for a writer, or musical notes for a musician. Once you know these principles, you can get into the flow of designing, much like the writer putting together a story or a musician composing a song. To design well, you need to internalize the principles of graphic design, and then the decisions you make when designing will become intuitive. That's when the fun begins. Creating visual hierarchy is really employing all your design tools to create a piece that communicates effectively and reaches its intended goals with the viewer. Let's take a look at a page from Apple's website. What is your eye drawn to first, second, and so on? What establishes the order in this page? Where is the emphasis? To answer this, consider the basic principles and fundamentals of design you've learned so far. Consider balance, alignment, white space, color, lines, type, and more. What brings order to this page and gives it such clear and elegant visual communication? In order to understand visual hierarchy deeper, it's important to take a look at the Gestalt principles of perception. The Gestalt principles of perception is a visual theory. It explains how people tend to organize visual elements into groups or unified wholes when certain principles are applied. This theory of visual perception was put forth by German psychologists in the 1920s. It's important to get a solid understanding of this visual theory, how it plays into creating a visual design, which is intended to have a particular effect on a viewer. Using the Gestalt principles of perception help to take the guesswork out of design. Let's dip our toe into the Gestalt principles of perception and learn some of these concepts that play into creating an effective design. They are made up of types of visual relationships. We'll explore a few of these, and I encourage you to read further into this subject following this video. For now, we'll look at figure-ground relationships, similarity, proximity, and closure. Elements are perceived as either figures, distinct elements of focus, or ground, the background or landscape on which the figure rests. Human perception involves deciding between what visual information is important, figure to focus on, and what can be safely ignored, ground. The ground often provides context, but we instantly find figures to focus on. This instant visual recognition is something we naturally do. When we focus on a figure, the remaining space becomes the ground. This can shift as focus shifts. Here is a classic example of a figure-ground illusion. In this image, you will either see profiles or a vase. you can shift in between them. As you focus on the vase figure, the faces become ground, and as you shift your focus to the faces, the vase becomes the ground. It oscillates as you shift focus. As designers, we can control how objects in design are perceived as either figure or ground. Let's look at this simple example that Andy Rutledge provides. He points out that there are two different types of focus here, even though both images have identical composition. The picture on the left shows a gray object, or figure of focus, resting on a white field, the ignored ground. The picture on the right shows a gray object, figure of focus, with a hole in it, all placed on the white background. These relationships are determined both by contrast and by how humans commonly perceive objects as either figure or ground. Things that are similar are perceived to be more related than things that are dissimilar. This is the counterpoint to contrast, which is how one item is made different from another item. There are many ways that elements can be considered similar. Recall our lesson with Kim on contrast, and just reverse this. Some ways that the elements can be similar are with similar color, shape, position, texture, orientation, and sizes, just to name a few. On the left is a simple example of similarity. Notice how similar size creates two groups. Now on the right, surprisingly, the same shapes and position with different colors takes on a new primary grouping. Here is an example of similarity in action. This image is found on Creatica. Notice how similar image shapes and similar text boxes create groupings. These groups are also clearly the foreground figure of attention compared to the black canvas's background. Proximity tells us that things that are close to one another are perceived to be more related than things that are spaced further apart. You may recall that Kim touched on this in one of the basic principle videos. She showed how close and how far away items are in a design depicts whether they form a visual unit. The particular emphasis of this was on organizing text-based information. Here's a simple example of how to understand proximity with shapes. Notice how the elements on the left appear as separate shapes, whereas the elements on the right appear to form a floral shape, a single unit. Note that the shapes on the left are the same size and position as those on the right. It's only proximity that unifies these shapes. Also note that we'll be using this shape later in a business card redesign in this lesson. Here is an example of proximity in action, taken from an image on Creatica of a website. Notice how proximity pulls together the various sections, such as the Who Am I section, My Work, as well as the What I Do sections. Closure indicates that when looking at a complex arrangement of individual elements, humans tend to first look for a single, recognizable pattern. When presented with less than the full picture, we attempt to employ the principles of closure to fill in missing information and form a complete image or idea based on common or easily recognizable patterns from our past experience and understanding. Closure occurs when an object is incomplete or a space is not completely enclosed. If enough of this shape is indicated, people perceive the whole by filling in the missing information. In order to utilize closure as an effective design mechanism, you must make it easy for closure to occur. Here's a simple example of closure. It's the iconic logo for the World Wildlife Fund. Notice how our mind pulls together these various black shapes into a panda image. You'll notice there's a theme that runs through these principles, as well as much of what you've learned in previous lessons, and that is visual relationships. As a designer, you're learning to control visual relationships. You're learning to lead a viewer's eye through design and communicate a particular emotion, emphasize information, and effectively communicate with the viewer. Let's take a look at the process of redesigning a business card before we take on this lesson's assignment. In this redesign, pay particular attention to how lessons we've learned in past videos come into play. Be sure to consider what design principles and tools are being used. This last winter holiday, I traveled to Minnesota to visit with family. I received a wonderful gift for Christmas, a free massage therapy gift certificate. I visited the local massage therapist and grabbed her business card upon leaving. The massage was excellent. The locale was well situated, the ambience inside was great, the massage therapist was professional and did an excellent job. I would be happy to recommend her to someone in need, but looking at her business card sure didn't communicate her professionalism. Let's take a look at it. To not offend anyone, I changed the name and recreated the card here. This is very close to the original design though. Also note that this image is zoomed in slightly so we can see it well. Now consider what problems you can pick up on this card. See if you can identify some issues using terms you picked up in the lessons you've learned so far. Feel free to pause the video to give yourself time to reflect. After you're done, hit play and we'll go over this together. Hit pause now. Welcome back. I hope you took some time to reflect. Here are a few problems that jump out to me right away. Color. The color doesn't fit the brand name of lilac. The color of this card is too dark and doesn't communicate health. Black for the floral element is a poor choice for the same reason. Positioning. We naturally read from top left across and down, at least in the Western hemisphere, or the Western world. The positioning of elements is haphazard here. In general, it follows the flow of the floral element, but that's not the best way to organize the information. It doesn't add to the legibility or clarity of the information on the card. Alignment. The alignment is a similar mess. Some items are aligned right and others left, and it just feels messy. The balance here feels off. Some elements are fighting for dominance. The floral element competes for attention with the black text. Contrast. The black text isn't easy to read against the dark tone of the background. The pattern isn't helping at all here either. It looks even worse on the actual printed card. And consider visual hierarchy. While proximity of related information is being done, it isn't being done well. Important textual information does have a visual hierarchy going from top to bottom. It is poorly aligned when looking from left to right though. There are elements, such as a large floral graphic, that distract from the visual hierarchy. Let's go ahead and redesign this and employ solid design principles that will greatly improve this business card. Now I'll open up Illustrator and take a look at how I redesigned this business card. Visual research. Visual research for a design project can be quite involved. In this case though, I know the market well. My wife happens to be a massage therapist, so I'm limiting the visual research to looking at images of lilacs. I downloaded this image here, just searching in Google Images. The next step I'm going to do is to choose a color scheme. To grab the color, you can pull the colors right from the photo. You just hit I when in Illustrator, and then you can select the colors. You can see here that I selected white, pink, lavender, and this is a dark purple. You can see the gradient as well. I took a few of these lilac colors as shown, and it creates a monochrome color scheme of various shades. And this will work well with the target market, brand for our business card. Next, we're going to redesign the logo, as it's currently just text. Let's consider the iconic portion that we're going to add. We'll put together a simple floral symbol for this. The shapes are then colored and turned into a blend that goes from dark purple through pink to white. Let me zoom in on this. You can see the simple shapes that this is made up of. Then I've used the various colors as shown above. Then it was turned into a blend. I'll touch on this symbol in a little while as well. Let's get into choosing our font. It's important to choose a typeface that fits your brand. In this case, I'm happy with the BrushScript MT Italic, which was the same one that was used on the card. I did do some experimenting though to see if I could find one that fit better, or to just reassure myself in the design process that indeed this is the one I wanted to stick with. What I like about the font is easy to read, it doesn't have an antiquated feel, and it's a style that we're looking for. So you can see this one here would be too antiquated. I like the style of this, but once I started this one, Cream Puff, but once I started experimenting with the iconic shape that we created, I just felt that the brush script MT Italic looked better with that. You can of course go much deeper with your font exploration, but I was happy at this point to move forward. Let's take a look at finalizing the logo. Since we're using a blended object in our logo, we want to be sure to supply our client with a one color version as well. As this is in case they ever need to get it screen printed or silk screen printed for a t-shirt, for example. This way, you could use this on 4-color printing for a business card, getting it laser printed, for example. But if you provide a one-color version as well, this is more of a classic logo, and this is more of a modern styling that you can use as an alternative. So at this point, I felt done with the logo. Now let's get into designing the front of the card. I'll zoom in on that. Design the front of the business card. Break down the design into thirds from top to bottom. As you can see here, it's not exactly a third, but we are using the rule of thirds here. This is about 2/3, and this is about 1/3. It's fine to just eyeball things in some cases. I think it works fine here. Our logo utilizes a great deal of white space and takes up the majority of the card, so our brand stands out well. Then we choose a secondary typeface for our text base information. For example, this information here. What I used here is Myriad Pro. We use bold to make the text stand out because it's on a dark white text on a dark background. Our text is centered into two groups at the bottom, which are left aligned. The bottom of each line lines up horizontally, and our name of our massage therapist is styled differently and made larger to stand out as well. Overall, the eye is led through the design beginning with the logo and then working from left to right through the important information at the bottom. The figures clearly stand out against our card's white background. Let's move on to designing the back of our card, or looking at the design of the back of our card. The back of our card takes the iconic portion of our logo and uses it as a brand design element. The various shapes are close in proximity, and they gel into a single illustrative element. The single textual piece of information on this side is the website address, which is kept small as it doesn't need to compete with the other information on the page. The contrast between the text size being small and the large illustrative figure fits nice. And overall, it's a balanced design, very clean, and fits the health, wellness focus of the brand and for branding a massage therapist. Now let's take a look at the complete business card, before and after. Here's before, and here's after. Now for your assignment. Grab some local business cards. You can find them in local shops and professional offices. Take a look through them, and you'll likely find one that jumps out to you as poorly designed. Redesign it, paying attention to visual hierarchy and the theory you've learned so far. In the next section, we'll move on to information and interaction. We'll get started with an introduction to information design. This is Sean Hodge, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thanks for listening.